Washboard Resonators, and today's video I'm going to take you through my collection of cymbals dating from like 20s or even pre-20s up till about the 40s-ish, and I thought it would be an interesting video, give you a bit of the history of how cymbals have changed in that time, and I also got out all the different ways that I've got of mounting them, which I didn't think I'd add that to this video, but I thought it was quite interesting as I was going along. So, if we start off, I've got this set of really early cymbals, so these are like really thick, really heavy. You wouldn't really, these are even too heavy for like rock guys now. You never really play these with a stick, but these have originated from, you know, the two players before drum kits, and then when it came to if you're marching, the bass drum player would have a cymbal on top, so you'd mount it as you still have in New Orleans nowadays. It's got like a round metal beater. You play the cymbal and the bass drum at the same time. It's that kind of cymbal, and it's before they were lathed to be thinner for when drummers wanted thinner cymbals. And this is what's called a snowshoe. It's, if we're talking, so from that cymbal on the bass drum, we're going down to, this is probably the next kind of pedal, and it's mounted on the floor. It could be like a Charleston cymbal as well, so we're talking into the 20s, and this is literally went around your ankle to hold it in place, and your whole foot goes on top and keeps it down. You can hear the kind of sound it makes. It's very harsh, very chunky, it kind of cuts through, but these cymbals weren't very nice sounding really. So this is the predecessor to what became the low boy, and then we'll go on to became the hi-hat. And this set, I've got here, I've got an amazing deal actually from a guy in America. So these are proper vintage A's. I've got the badge here. If any of you look up all your badges, but this is, and they're all beautifully light. You can see they're so thin they actually bend. And this was part of the same. They weren't making hi-hats so much. So then they was making sets of cymbals, so you could have a pair that matched like this. And this is the same set. This is the lightest one I've got at all. In my whole collection, it's actually just bends under its own weight. But there's some great pictures of Gene Krupa, one of my favourite drummers, that have all the cymbals all bent out of place, and they're like this because they were used and hit, but they're so thin they bend in themselves, but they don't crack because all vibrations can go through them. So if you find them, they haven't been smashed up in the 50s by people that were finding them cheaply, then they're still in general good condition. So I love this. I've got 3 sets of hi-hats I use all the time basically, and this is I've got a set from the 20s, or could be early 30s these, and then I've got a 40s K's, and then I've got a late 40s, early 50s A's, and they're like what I use for all my different genres, and I love them. They're beautiful light sound. With those, if you think of Papa Jojo sound like that, they don't have much of a chick sound. They're very thin, and actually if you press too hard you can turn the cup inside out or the bell inside out, so you've got to be kind of careful with them. But they cut through. What I love about some of these old cymbals, and particularly nowadays you'd call these like splash cymbals, and when it comes to the 70s and 80s they were like effect cymbals. They really had to like cut through the music. If you're talking prog and things like that, the splashes were made to cut through, whereas these were actually made to kind of blend, so like they kind of sit in the orchestra and the music, but without really cutting through, which is not what you think about these days, but they sound beautiful. So onto this one, I'll put this on this. I guess we can zoom in here, so I've got so the way this cymbal's mounted, this is a modern version of like a quick release cymbal stand, so I use these so I can get them on and off quicker, and there's no wing nut. This cymbal has been drilled, so you get them on and off quicker. I haven't drilled it out quite enough. I did re-drill this cymbal, which some people say you shouldn't do because it ruins the originality of it. But if I'm playing in other bands or on other kits, like if I have to go to a venue and use a house kit, I want to use my own cymbals, so I need to use these. So yeah, this I got this cymbal. I think this is like an old A again. It's been you can see the laving on it, and it's again very thin, not quite as thin as these. But this is my favourite kind of tricky cymbal sound. So anything in pre-hi-hat again, before you play that hi-hat rhythm in the 20s stuff. This is how you protect time doing off the cymbal. So you can hear it's like again it cuts through the band, but also sits in it. So it's like it's not really bright, it's not really dark. It's just a beautiful sounding cymbal, and it's a bit bigger than. If you look at these earlier ones, these are nearly 12, and this is This is it's about 13.5, so it's a little bit bigger, a little bit easier to play some of the tricky cymbal stuff on. It's a well used and loved cymbal. I talked about this one already, but I guess we can go. Let's look at these mounts again now as I'm going around. So so cymbals are now being placed on the drums or like clamped onto the hoops generally, like all these are. This is a cool, I think it's a 40s, like big gooseneck stand. So when you had the console kits in the 30s, with the rails and everything on, and the cymbal sounds would literally stick into them. But if you didn't have one of them, or you wanted to add on cymbals to your existing bass drum, then you could get these cool gooseneck stands. They're a little bit awkward to play nowadays because the cymbal's actually very far forward to do that, but I think it looks great. And then I've got this even rarer little small one, this England one, which is a bit more practical to use. It actually sticks out a bit further and it's a bit smaller. Now, so to mount these cymbals, they're mounted on old cymbal mounts, so it's probably easier to see. So it's a very simple design. This is actually where it's made as a Slingerland one out in Chicago, but it's literally a leather strap that passes through a washer and a felt, and it just holds it in place, and it makes it easier. As I was playing that tricky cymbal stuff on that cymbal on the stand, it just means you can hold the cymbal in place. Here's mounted on a T-bar, which is another option. It's what I love about all this old hardware, it's so kind of primitive. You have to look after and be careful in the way you play it, and it can't stand up to kind of modern volumes. But when you're talking about none of the instruments were mic'd up, you actually play an acoustic level, and you just looked after your stuff and you played it carefully. So it's a cool old T-bar from the same kind of era, as is this, and it's an even simpler, just a straight bar that's clamped onto the hoop, and it's literally a rubber mount, so you just push the cymbal over it and pull it off, so it doesn't last forever when doing it, but it's so simple again. This one's a little rarer. If it's got a cool spring like mount on it. It's not actually a spring, but it's partly for decoration, partly you can get it where you want it. And you can, again, it's really primitive. You can move it out, or the whole thing can spin around as well. So this one's, I don't use this one that much because it's a bit low for anything really. Or sometimes I can have it on the side here, and I can have my blocks and cowbells on it. And then as we're getting later, so they start, instead of clamping things onto the hoop, they start drilling the drums and putting some mounts on. So this one I've got on, this is a 59-60s kit, so this is an early 60s mount. This is actually drilled into the shell, but they did this in the definitely in the 50s, I think there's some in the 40s as well. I've got a 50s kit, it's got it. And this splash just mounted, so if you wanted to add a splash, so if you're still harking back to like the big band era, they had a lug, an extra nut box and lug onto the shell, so you could have the splash cymbal sound in it, or again just one that's mounted on. Now these two I got here, so that was one that's not mounted, and this one is original. They got two interesting toppers here. So into the 60s, this was just another quick release topper to the cymbal, and just lean it off and go back on. They're hard to find these days, and they only fit on old cymbal stands because the threads are different. And this one's an even more, more sophisticated, but it's literally like a tilter, and you can pop the cymbal off and tilt it back on. And I like using these because they still stand up, and they're cool little correct things for the era. So finally then, I'll just talk you through these three last cymbals, I guess then. So this is an old China, so it's riveted. Kind of a horrible sound, isn't it? But they're again, these weren't ridden on like some of the Chinas became in the 40s. They're too small, and then again it's just like a cutting sound. It's a much darker cutting sound to these splashes. This cuts through, and there was this this big crash from China and things like that. There was a bit of obsession of having some Eastern sounding sounds and music with the temple blocks and the Chinese toms as well. Chinese cymbals came in, and obviously they're even older than some of the Turkish ones, like the Chinese cymbals. And finally, this is a homemade, like, cool riveted cymbal. It's knackered, to be honest. It's got a big split in it, and these are just homemade rivets in it. But Ludwig did make a cool, I can't remember the name of them now. They've got a really cool name, and they've got tambourine jangles on the top that are branded with Ludwig. So it's on my list to get one day. But the sound, it's a really cool sound, and again, it's not too harsh. It's just quite mellow through, but you can really hear the rivets in it, which I like. And finally, this isn't a very nice sounding cymbal. I think this is British. I think this just came out of Premier. So if you couldn't afford Ludwig, Zildjian cymbals or anything like that, then you could other companies would sell you them, and you could brand them yourselves, all different branded. So this one was done by Premier in the 30s. I think it's Premier. It's got the silver flash written on it, just here. So it's all how they branded it. And I like to use this because it's not a very good sound to say, but you can still see it's quite light, and it bends like the other one. It is bent more, but it's got this rivet in the middle. Is what is actually these original cymbals that hung on these stands used, because they won't fit over a stand. The rivet is just it helps. I'm not even sure what it's for actually. I guess it stops it eroding away as quickly and just helps hold these kind of cymbal mounts in place. But it's cool, original 30s cymbal that won't fit on the modern stand. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that video, and if you've got any questions, yeah, send us a message and we'll answer them. Thank you very much.